Hi, everyone. Welcome to the research seminar today. I'm Rong Chen, Associate Professor in the Higher Ed program. And today, the topic of my presentation is large-scale national and international data in education, data types, and examples of research application. So this is all about me. As I said, I'm an associate professor in the higher education program in the department. I actually briefly taught as a faculty member in China for 2 years before I came to the University of Michigan for my doctoral degree. And after that, I came to Seton Hall as a part of the faculty in the department. My research focuses on student success in higher education and how policies at different levels, including institutional, state, and federal government level, may affect the student success, including their transition from high school to college, their experience in college, and their life beyond college. So most of my research has been focusing on how policy affects students and the equity and equality issues in those areas. My research has been funded by some national foundations and associations, and my research has appeared in some top-tier journals. And currently, I serve on the editorial board of Research in Higher Education, as well as the Journal of Postsecondary Student Success. On the personal side, I have 2 boys. One is 9th grader and 15 years old, and the other is 13 years old. My husband is also a faculty member in public health area, teaching biostats. And I was just chatting with a couple of students here that, yes, this semester I'm sabbatical, but I'm virtually back to do this seminar. And in the fall, I'm going to be formally back to the program and look forward to seeing you all in person that time. So for this seminar, I understand that some of the students may have different backgrounds. Some of you may come from K-12, some may be in the higher ed program, and some of you may have your topics determined already and working on your dissertation project already, but some of you may still think about whether qualitative or quantitative research method will be your choice. So I'll keep that in mind and make sure that my seminar will be inclusive and consider all the levels of your background. So what are the goals of this seminar? Well, first of all, I hope that by the end of the seminar, you will be able to understand why large-scale secondary data for research, and what are some important large-scale survey databases in education? What major research issues that may be addressed with those resources? What are the advantages as well as challenges and strategies of using large-scale data? At the end, I also wanted you to have a chance to look at some example empirical studies that have utilized such data in educational research. This seminar also serves as a preliminary introduction to the Applied Quantitative Research course that I'm going to offer in the fall of 2022. Why large-scale secondary data? Well, before answering that question, we need to understand what are the 2 types of data in quantitative research. One type is called primary data, the data that you actually designed the survey instrument for and you collected data by yourselves. The second data is the second type, and it's type of data that you use after somebody else has already collected for you. So there are a huge amount of benefits for using large-scale secondary data. Think about it. Somebody else has already collected for you. So that means it will save a lot of time and money for you on data collection. And another advantage is that most of the large-scale national and international data are collected by professional researchers. So these data tend to be very reliable and high quality. And then lastly, because these data are large scale and cover a comprehensive range of topics and variables, data, information, and so any studies using those kind of large scale data may have the national and international implications. So now we know why large scale secondary data. So what are the different kinds of data, right? And what kind of research issues can be addressed? And what are the challenges and opportunities of using such data? Before that, I also wanted to have a warming up exercise here. So why don't you close your eyes, right? Close your eyes and think about any problem or research issue or research questions that you might be want to explore, right? Take a moment thinking about any problem or research issues that you are interested in. And then I'm going to welcome a couple of you to share your interested topic or research questions with us. And we're going to then revisit those topics later on after the seminar. So why don't you all take a couple of minutes, think about the topic, issues that you are interested in. So give yourself a couple of minutes. Anybody who wants to share your interested topic? Feel free to just talk. Feel free to share.
Okay, like student debt in higher ed.
Okay, student debt in higher ed.
And I think Kim has her hand up to Dr. Chen. I'm not sure. Sometimes you can't see.
Right, that's a good point. I can't see, so it would be great if you can just talk and share.
Sure, thank you. Thanks, Morella. My topic I was interested in is pay disparity between men and women faculty in PA programs.
Pay disparities?
Yep.
Across
faculty?
Faculty?
Yep, in PA programs, physician assistant programs.
All right, great. Awesome. Any other topics?
The impact of test optional policies pre and post COVID.
All right, test optional policy during the COVID time. Wonderful, thank you for sharing. And those are great topics. And how about we keep those questions and topics in mind for now? And let's come back and revisit those topics after learning more about the data sources available. All right, let's move on to the next page. Now we're going to talk about what data sources are available. For those students who are interested in international topics, there are three major sources. One is PISA, Program for International Students Assessment by OECD. This survey covers students about 15 years old in industrialized countries. The data include students level, school principals, parents across over 80 countries or regions. At the country level, the World Bank has World Development Indicators. It's compiled from officially recognized international sources, and it has the information across different countries on education access, progression, completion, literacy, teachers, and expenditures. It covers education from K-12 to higher education. If you are interested in using some educational statistics across different countries, then UNESCO database would be very helpful. So if you look at the 3 different data sources, the PISA data is at the student level with school and parent information as well, while the World Bank data and UNESCO are at the country level. And the World Bank data allows you to do some more advanced time series analysis, while UNESCO data tend to be more for descriptive analysis at the country level.
Dr. Chen, can I ask a quick question about the international data?
Sure.
Is it okay? Is it a good time or?
Yeah, we may have
I'll wait till
some
the
time.
end. That's okay. That's
yeah,
okay.
what's the question?
wait.
That's okay. No worries.
No, I just wanted to, and I'm trying to Google it, but I was just curious when it comes to some of this data, do they have like information for certain programs, or I would say in the higher education for certain profession when we're looking?
That's a great
Or is-
question. I doubt if they have, because these are all at a country level. I mean,
Okay.
for World Bank and UNESCO, right? These are all
Yeah.
country level data. So I doubt if they have such specific program level information.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, but if you're looking for national level data, there might be some resources available.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's come to our national level data, or we have, if you are interested in K-12 research, then early childhood longitudinal study is one of them. It's a sample of children followed from kindergarten through the 5th grade. And there is also a middle grade longitudinal study that tracks students from 6th grade to 8th grade in middle school. And if you're interested in teachers, principals, teacher hiring practices, professional development, and other conditions in K-12, then the schools and the staffing survey will be a considerable data source for you. And keep in mind that those sources that I'm introducing right now are some major data sources in K-12 and higher education. But it doesn't mean that I will cover everything, right, in my seminar. So there are some data sources that exist out there but may not be covered for today. But feel free to contact me if you have any questions about some other type of survey data available. Now we're going to look at the high school data, right? And high school to college. So there are 2 major high school to college level data. One is called Education Longitudinal Study of 2002. It tracks students from 10th grade until high school and beyond their high school and college, or the world of work. So this data actually track the students over 10 years. So you can imagine that you can, the data can cover all sorts of topics, including their experience in high school, their social emotional development, in high school, their transition to college, and their persistence in college, graduation from college, and their labor market outcomes, and even their family formation and citizenship. The high school longitudinal study is it's very similar to IELTS data. The only difference is that it tracked the students even earlier, from 9th grade until 10 years later. And the questions focuses not only on those that were covered by IELTS, but also focus a little bit more on STEM education. So for students who are interested in STEM courses, majors, and careers beyond college, then high school longitudinal data would be a better choice, especially because it's even more more recently collected. And now let's take a look at 2 other data sources. One is the NIPSS, the National Postsecondary Student AIDS Study, which collect all the information about college students, including undergrad, grad, and first professional students in the United States. What kind of financial aid they have received, how much they received, and what are the background characteristics and the educational experience of students who go to college. So this covers not only undergrad, but also grad students' financial aid experience. The other one is called the National Study of Postsecondary Faculty, NSOP. NSOP is one of the very few national databases focusing on faculty members. It covers information about the faculty characteristics, their instruction, research, public service, their salary, etc. Unfortunately, the NCS has not been renewing the effort to collect the more recent data. So the most recent NSOP data was still from 2004. And another limitation with this survey is that it has very limited information about students. For students who are interested in college students and students, after their graduation from college, the BBS, which is the Beginning Post-Secondary Student Survey, it tracks the students from the first year, freshman year, until 6 years later. So you can imagine that the data covers everything about students' background characteristics, financial aid, their progress, their persistence, attainment, and degree completion. And also, the nice thing about it is that it has a yearly information, right? And it's every year within the 6 years. The BPS provide the yearly information about many of the factors. While the IELTS data high school longitudinal study, although it's a longitudinal work survey as well, it did not survey the students every year among the 10 years. For the BPS data, it actually tracks students almost every year for some major characteristics, especially financial aid. If you're interested in college graduates, right, and how their professional work, their transition to graduate school, and their debt burden, and their family formation, right, and even purchasing housing, right, then baccalaureate and beyond would be the best choice for you. This data set, the sample track the students from college graduate, from the first year when they graduate, for over 10 or 7 years, depending on the cohorts. Some cohorts tend to cover more time, and some cohort of data covers less time. So far, we have introduced data sets at the student level, right? And now I'm going to talk about another data source, which is at the institutional level. It is called Integrated Post-Secondary Education Data System. So all the institutions in the United States that receive federal government financial aid for students, they are required to submit their institutional data every year. And that's how the IPADS data are collected. Such data include institutional characteristics, student outcomes at the institutional level, enrollment, completion, graduation rate, student financial aid, student to faculty ratio, and institutional expenditure on different categories, and also human resources, including employee by assigned position, and faculty and salaries. So keep in mind that everything from IPADS is at institutional level, and there are no yearly information data from IPADS. There are some other national data that I also want to briefly mention here. They're being used by researchers, but not as much as some others that I have introduced earlier. The SERP data, which is done by UCLA, covers, there's 3 different surveys: a freshman survey, your first college year survey, and college senior year survey. And Harry data, also a part of UCLA data. They also have faculty survey, especially about pedagogy, for example, service learning. NESI data, some of you may know already. It's done, collected by Indiana University. FASI data, faculty survey of student engagement, focus on faculty perception of student engagement. And Harry, NESI, FASI, and SERP data are national data, but the difference between those type of data and the NCES data we talked earlier is that these data here that are sponsored, collected by institutions, the samples tend to be from self-selected institutions. So institutions who agreed to take those surveys are included in the sample, and those who do not agree to participate, they're not a part of the sample. So on the other hand, differently on the contrary, NCES data always select a nationally representative sample and track the students over time if it's a longitudinal study. So in terms of the sample, NESI data is more solid and useful to, and the results can be more generalizable to the country at the national level. And now there's another data source from National Science Foundation. They have a survey of earned doctorates, survey of graduate students, and postdoctorates in science and engineering. So for students who are interested in graduate education, right, especially science, STEM majors, or any kind of doctorate degree programs, you could consider either one of them. And for those who are going to finish your dissertation, defend your dissertation, once you defend your dissertation, you actually will be asked to fill out a survey of earned doctorates. So that's something that interesting and good to know. And there are actually 2 other national data sets that I think will be very interesting to some of the students. If you are interested in topics related to art education and artistic careers, then the Strategic National Arts Alumni Project by Indiana University could be interesting to you. And if you're interested in professional education, such as law school, and student experience engagement in law schools, then you could take a look at the law school survey of student engagement by Indiana University. It covers the law schools from the US, Canada, and Australia. The topics cover students' engagement, educational experience, debt, stress, and career choices. I have seen some researchers who have successfully done and published their research, and they also successfully received some funding to do such research. So now we know that there are many benefits and advantages of using large-scale data. Good quality, transparent methods, large-scale results can be generalizable to the national level, and implications nationwide or globally. And they're ready to use, right? They're ready for you to use. They're there. All you need to do is to know how to access such data and how to use them. But there are also challenges of using large-scale data, and there are some strategies that you need to be aware of. Well, first of all, for national data, they're heavily relied on government and associations who collect the data. And when you choose the best data, you need to have some caution in your selection. For example, you have no control over what kind of research questions, what kind of questions are covered in the questionnaire, right? So you have to take a look at the survey questions and make sure the surveys include crucial variables and data that are needed for your comprehensive model building, right? And there are some samples, as I said, that are nationally representative, but some surveys, for example, NESI, FESI, and SERP data, they're based on self-selected institutions. For international data, you may have to be cautious about the comparability of data across different countries. Some measures may be measured very consistently across different countries, but some may not. So you need to have a detailed look at the survey methodology documents and make sure you understand how the measures are measured, right? And making sure they're comparable across different countries. Another issue is about data storage for restricted data used data. So in the past over 10, 20, even no longer years, some of the restrict data, all of the restrict data from NCES, for example, are required to be used in a designated data room. So I have been the coordinator for restricted data use at Seton Hall for this NCES data for the last several years. And we now have a data room in the library on the 4th floor. So students, once they submit their IRB application, they should be able to apply for the permission to use the restrict data. The good news is that nowadays we actually are going to have the remote access option. So that's something that we are still trying to explore and see whether we can get a sponsor support from the university to gain that access for researchers, faculty members, and students. Another challenge of using large-scale data is the analytic methods, including how to deal with missing data. If your data have students nested within institutions and institutions nested within states, how are you going to handle that and take into consideration of the multi-level nature of the data? And most of the national data sets have complex survey design, including weights and stratification. So how to consider those features in your analysis, and how to how to take into account of these factors in your analysis accurately and correctly is important. And lastly, because all of the data are secondary, so you can't really make causal inference conclusion unless you actually are going to use some causal inference methods. So just be cautious about what you can conclude and what you cannot conclude. So these are the challenges of using secondary data, but there are opportunities as well. I mean, if you look at the introduction that we just talked about of these data sets, there are wider and more choices of data as time goes on. Also, we have better and affordable software available. At Seton Hall, we used to have only SPSS, but now the university allows graduate students to have Stata for free, and Stata is more powerful in data management and is also easier to learn as well. There's also a chance for interdisciplinary collaboration and funding and career opportunities based on the use of secondary large-scale data. And the education field is developing quickly, and there are a lot of advances in development, and which is exciting. So now let's revisit the warming up exercise that we did earlier, right? We have 3 different topics shared by the students earlier on. The first is about student debt. Well, student debt is pretty broad, but there are many different ways to address student debt, right? It could be what characteristic determines student debt, right? Or student debt, how student debt is related to their career choices, their decision to go to graduate school or not, right? So depending on the topic, but for sure, the student debt is covered in multiple databases, especially if we look at a college graduate student debt after graduation from college, right? Then the baccalaureate and beyond would be the best choice for student debt issues. The second topic some of the students shared today is the pay disparities across faculty in physician assistant programs. Well, if we look at the pay disparity across faculty members at the national level, there are a few choices. The ENSO, right, we talked earlier about, could be a good data set to consider. If you're going to look at the PA programs specifically, that's something that we need to look into the data and see if they actually, I'm sure they actually have the faculty members' discipline information, right? Whether they're from health discipline, they're from science, or they're from humanity, social sciences, right? Business programs. So that's something that we could further look into if you have such interest. And there are also some professional associations that collect their own data. And that's another way to think about data sources. We didn't cover those kind of data today, but actually later on when we look at some example research studies using large-scale data set, I'm actually going to briefly mention about 2 students who have used professional associations data for their dissertation. So the second topic is also possible to consider for using the national databases. The third is shared by a student today is test optional policy and its impact during the COVID time. Well, it depends on, so I guess the test optional policy, if you look at that, it's going to be on the institutional level, right? There's no way for you to, well, it could be at in student level, but to my knowledge, I don't know if the most recent national data set actually has covered some questions about whether students actually use a test optional policy. But you do have the institutional data, the IPADS data, right? And you could, okay, the tricky issue here is that test optional policy is not is probably not collected by IPADS. In my experience, based on my experience, test optional policies information can be collected manually by yourself. So I do have a couple of students who have done or who are doing studies on test optional policy for their dissertation, and they use the institutional name and IPADS ID number and just created a variable indicating whether the institution started the test optional policy in a specific year. So that's something you could do using IPADS data. You can combine the information you collected about test optional policy for each institution and then combine it with IPADS data. And then you can take a look at how test optional policy may have affected or not affected student outcomes at the institution level during the COVID time. So the good thing about IPADS data is that it is collected every year. So, and usually it's about 1 or 2 years of gap between the data collection and the availability or the release of the data. So if you're interested in test optional policy and student success during the COVID time, you may be able to access such data during the COVID time. Maybe next year you may see some of the data available. So great questions and great topics. I hope my explanation will be helpful for you, and I'll be happy to talk with you further if you have more questions about your topic. Now I'm going to talk about data access. So we know what are the data available, but how to access those data, right? The good thing is that there are public use data like PISA, World Bank, UNESCO data, IPADS data. They can be downloadable directly from online. For some NCES data like ECLS, SAS, ELS, and high school longitudinal study, the public use data version of these surveys can be accessed through an online downloading tool called Online Codebook. However, there are also some restricted data. For example, ELS and the high school longitudinal study, they have a restricted version of the data, which includes some more confidential information like their grades, their students' achievement and GPA. For example, those kind of information are restricted. And so NIPSAS, BPS, BNB, these are all restricted data. You can use Data Lab to explore what kind of variables there are, what kind of sample size it may look like. You can even do some descriptive analysis and some preliminary regression analysis, but you cannot physically actually access the data by yourself. So there's no way for you to actually use more advanced methods to look at the data more comprehensively. So for students who are interested in using those kind of data set, they would want to use the restrict data, which will be required to be used in a data room, or you can gain the access for the remote option. Now, finally, I would like to share some example empirical studies that have used the national data sets. I only selected some of the articles recently published by my mentees or by myself, and some colleagues, because I know them pretty well. So if you look at the list here, there are studies that have used high school longitudinal study. There's also a study that have used data from the Commission on Accreditation of Athletic Training Education. And another study used ALS data, and the fourth one used B&B data, and the last one used the end of program survey created by the Physician Assistant Education Association. The topics cover a wide range of topics, including STEM major choice, how AP courses are related to that, and then the national study on relationship between programmatic factors and athletic training education, BUC pass rates, STEM students persistence, undergraduate debt, and graduate school application and enrollment. And the last one is about factors that influence job choice for physician assistant students. I also included some mentees' dissertations finished recently. One of them used iPads data combined with an external online data on student protests, and he did a study on how resources in institutional characteristics are related to student mobilization in higher education. Another student did a dissertation using BPS data and looked at first year retention of students with a disability. The third one is also based on ALS data, looking at how college experience may be related to college graduates' job satisfaction. And NESI data is also used in one of the students' dissertation, looking at international and American undergraduate students' engagement in the STEM and non-STEM fields.